Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Women's Space Vancouver February webinar. Thanks for joining us today. Women's Space Vancouver is a grassroots feminist nonprofit organization working to protect and reclaim women's rights, including the right to retain spaces and organizations created by and for women. And because we have so many guests today and such a big, exciting topic, I'm not going to say too much else about Women's Space Vancouver. To find out more about what we do and what we stand for, please visit our website at womenspaceyvr.com or just search Women's Space Vancouver online, you'll find it. Today, we're fortunate to have three special guests. We have Ruth Deneen and Christina Lesch from FiLiA Hague Mothers, and we have Anita Guerra, who is a Hague mother herself and co-founder of Hague Explained. So because not everybody's going to be familiar with the Hague Convention and particularly the details about it, I'm wondering, to start us off, Anita, could you explain what is the Hague Convention and particularly then the civil aspects of international child abduction, and then what was its purpose originally, if you could talk a bit about that.
Hello, Chris. Yes, thank you. I'd like to try. Yes, so I'm Anita Guerra. I'm speaking to you from the UK. I'm the co-founder of Hague Explained, a non-profit registered in England. And we set up to raise awareness of the Hague Abduction Convention, as it's commonly known. Just to take you back a little bit in time, some of you might remember a bit at this time, some might not. The convention was drafted in the late 1970s, so quite a while ago, when lawyers, judges, politicians started noticing that there was becoming a practice of mothers in their countries starting relationships with foreign gentlemen, having children. The children would grow up with their mothers, and then one day the fathers would say, I'm going to take the children back to my country, you can have a little break. All sounded wonderful. The mother would say, oh, great, I'll see my family, my friends. See you in a couple of weeks, kids. And then the father would refuse to bring them home. Obviously, this is not okay. The children were being taken away from their place of habitual residence, a rather contested term because there is no legal definition of habitual residence. So the children were in a foreign country. Often it would turn out it was not just to visit family. It could be for things such as forced marriage or religious practices that perhaps the other parent, the mother, generally didn't really approve of or agree to, or things like FGM as well. So it was imperative to bring the children back home as quickly as possible. And the Hague Convention, first signed in October 1980, was set up to bring those children back, ideally within 6 weeks. So no time should be lost, bring the children back. The parent was encouraged to come back with them as well. So it was a fairly successful law when it started off. Today, it's got 103 signatories. So most of the countries that you know or that you visit or work in will be signatories. And it works still exceedingly well. Unfortunately, the world has changed and the Hague Convention hasn't. So where in the past the idea was it would be fathers taking the children off to a foreign country and refusing to bring them home, today, we know statistics show us that around 75% of the cases are brought against mothers. So it's the mothers who are taking the children to another country, whether they are running away, fleeing, or going with permission. We can get into that later, what that means. But basically, the mothers are taking the children to another country. So you have to ask yourself, why would a mother up and leave her home and take the children to another country, which is usually her home country? So what could bring her to do that? Well, anyone who knows anything about domestic abuse knows that mothers are always told, if you're in an abusive relationship, just leave. Where do you go? If you're in a foreign country, perhaps you don't speak the language so well, you don't know the customs, you don't understand how the laws work or who to go to for help. Wherever you are, you want to go home. You want to go back to your family, your friends, the circles that you understand, the government you understand, the legal systems you might have some understanding of. And that's where the Hague Convention is now really falling down in failing mothers who are trying to keep their children safe from abuse.
Oh.
So it's a little outline for you.
No, that was, yeah, very clear. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And Ruth Deneen, what are the problems that have been created, and how is it not working for women and children? So, I mean, Anita already told us what was happening. So can you go into a bit more detail about what that is?
Sure, and we could probably have a whole session just on the problems of the Hague
Yes,
Convention.
yes.
When I first started this, I actually said to a Hague mum, well, the convention really isn't working. And she said to me, on the contrary, it's working perfectly. It's working for abusive fathers. And that's the bottom line now. So there are so many problems. I mean, I think the first set of problems comes because the convention is based on a number of evidence-free assertions. So the first assertion, and Anita has mentioned this, is that abduction is always harmful. Originally, that was the case. The children were in danger. But now there's the belief that abduction is always harmful, and indeed is a form of domestic violence in its own right. And so the reason for leaving is irrelevant as far as the courts are concerned. And the second assertion, which relates to that, is that therefore rapid return, is always in the best interest of the child. So you have that default within the convention. And I think the third one that drives me particularly mad is that there's like a gentleman's agreement that says that all of these signatory states can keep the mothers and children safe. So if the mothers and children have to go back to the country where the abuser is, it'll be fine because there's laws, there's the police, there's social services, they will be kept safe. So you have all those assertions which underpin the convention and make it very difficult to challenge. And on top of that, and I'm sure many of the people here will know about this, there are social and cultural biases which are baked into our justice system, just embedded. So there is a strong bias against women, particularly against mothers, and the justice system is resolutely sexist and misogynist. And that occurs in family courts, for those of you that have experience with family courts, and also in Hague courts. But also there are additional discriminations, I think, against non-citizens, which are generally what happens in a Hague court. You are not a citizen, you've tried to go home, and the courts see you as not a citizen and see the father as the person they need to protect. So migrant women, for example, really have a hard time with the Hague Convention. And also it's racist, it's classist, it's lesbophobic. I mean, any sort of ist you want to mention that's in society comes through in the Hague Convention cases. And I think the final set of problems, as I say, we could have days on it, is that that wouldn't be so difficult if those who administer the Hague and those who implement it actually acknowledged that there were problems and set out to solve them. But in fact, those people absolutely defend the status quo of the convention to the hilt. And in doing so, they resolutely ignore the evidence. So the fact that domestic abuse is everywhere, there's a tsunami of it. They still don't believe the mother when she testifies to the abuse that's happened to her. They often don't even know about coercive control, but either way, it's either unacknowledged or it's minimized or it's just dismissed in these cases. And the reality of post-separation abuse, there's a real idea that once you separate, it's all sorted. You know, you don't, even if you've been abused previously, it's all better. So that evidence is ignored. The impact on the child, then there are some countries like the UK where the child is acknowledged to be a victim in their own right, even if the abuse wasn't directed at them. But many countries don't accept this and feel that abuse against the mother has no impact on the child whatsoever.
Right.
And as I said before, that inability of states to actually keep women and children safe is refuted constantly.
Right.
So those are some of the difficulties.
Right. Well, that's a big and good explanation, I think. And we'll talk more about, well, both Ruth and Christina work for FiLiA Hague Mothers, and Ruth was the founder. So we'll get more into that, the work that you do and how broad and complex it is, and all the different countries that are participating in trying to improve the situation for Hague Mothers. So, but Anita, since you yourself, of all of us in this group, is one who's gone through this, you are a Hague mother. I'm wondering if you would say a little bit about yourself, your situation, as much as you feel comfortable with. I know that if I ask you something you don't want to answer, you're you're going to tell me that. So what happened to you? Where were you living, and what happened to you and your children as a result of the Hague Convention?
Yeah, Chris, I'm happy to share my experience as well, because basically at Hague Explained, we exist to raise awareness and to let people know what's happened. So it's important that we can tell our own experiences as well.
Yeah.
So my Hague case was actually in 2014, quite a long time ago now, in London. The case is always in the country that you're actually found in. So of course I'd come back to my home country, which is the UK, with my children, with permission. Perhaps I should take a quick step back. My children were both born in Germany, which is where I'd been living for a long time. And my he became my ex-husband, but he became my husband before he became my ex-husband. So the children's father joined me in Germany, and then we had 2 children, and we moved to the United States. So my children had German citizenship, British citizenship, and American citizenship, triple citizenship. We moved to the US. I was badly abused. I was coercively controlled, financially abused, physically, sexually abused, everything you can imagine. And I was too afraid to ever say anything to anyone, because it was made very clear to me that I was a foreigner living in the United States. We know how the United States likes foreigners, don't we? So that was clear to me even in 2015 when I moved, sorry, in 2007 when I moved to the US, that I would not be tolerated if I stepped out of line. So I didn't. Then in 2013, my then husband, who was a commercial pilot, gave me permission to return to the UK with the children. He suggested that I rent a house in the UK, that I put the children in school, enroll them in school. And I had emails detailing all of this. He bought us the tickets to get to the UK, because obviously he was a pilot. He visited us 3 or 4 times, saw the house, the school, and so on. The children and I settled in the UK. We ended up being here 16 months. Although something that most parents, mothers don't know, is that if you go with permission from the children's father, which many of us do, we think, finally, we've got to safety. We're back in our home countries. It's all been allowed. We've got permission. We've got emails saying, yes, take the children. Here's the ticket. Put them in school. The father's allowed to change his mind. So
Can I ask you, can I interject there and ask you, Nita, first, how old were the children at the time? And also, was the arrangement that you would then continue living there and that the marriage was going to end? Or you said he visited you, so was he hoping to continue having that marriage over in the UK?
he didn't talk about it. He did visit us, and obviously I hoped that that meant the marriage was over, but it was not something we ever discussed. And I was still very afraid when he was around, or even if he was on the phone. Anyone who's been in the situation knows just hearing the voice or seeing the face on video, that look in your eyes is terrifying. So I was very afraid to press the subject and try and take it any further. But he encouraged me. He wrote to me and said, tell everyone we're separated, because that way you can go to your government and get benefits, welfare as it's known in the States, because of course he always refused to give us any support financially when we were in the UK. So I very happily went and said, I'm separated, I'm on my own with 2 children, I've got to rent a house, put them in school and so on. Of course, we got healthcare here as British citizens, so everything was fine. They saw their grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody very frequently. It was a great community. But the Hague Convention is supposed to be filed within 12 months. So there's a 12-month time in which someone can file a Hague Convention. And very often in these sorts of cases where you've been given permission, we find the father changes his mind after 11 months. So it's getting close to 12 months. If you don't know about the Hague, you won't even know that that 12 months is important. But if you're with children, my children at the time were 6 and 8, 11 months, that's nearly, it's more than a full academic year they'd been through. They were settled. They were in the after school clubs. They had friends. They had birthday parties they'd been to, sleepovers with friends. They're part of the local cricket club, all sorts of things. So 11 and a half months, and suddenly, wow, you're in a Hague case. Then you have to very quickly work out, what is a Hague case? What does it mean? How is this possible? My ex-husband had actually cut all contact with us for almost 2 months. It got so bad that I'd phoned my ex-mother-in-law in New York and said, is he okay? Is he still alive? He doesn't answer messages from me or the children. And it's been nearly 2 months. And she said, no, he's fine. He calls me every Saturday.
Mm.
So, okay. And then one day he did get on the phone or a video call and said, right, well, I finished the training. I'd got a new job. So I finished the training now. You can come home next week. And I said, well, I don't think that's really a great idea because the kids are in school and it's the Easter term. Maybe we wait till the end of the school term would be best for their education, or ideally wait till the end of the school year. So July would be best. So I wasn't saying no. I was just saying, we can't do this. We can't say, hey, children, today it's Tuesday. Let's go to school. Hey, children, today it's Wednesday. Let's go to the airport. That's not okay with children. And the minute I said, no, we need to talk about it, he said, no, I'm not talking about it. I'm going to come and bring my children home.
Mm.
So I went to the police.
Mhm.
I thought, hang on, I'm British. I'm in the UK. My children are British. They're in school. We're getting benefits, welfare. So the government is supporting us financially. I'm sure he can't just come and take our children just like that. So I went to the police. They confirmed, of course, he couldn't just do that. They also told me that I'd just reported a crime to them, which I had no idea of. I didn't understand it. And I said, well, I haven't. I've just answered your questions and told you what happened. And they said, no, you've just reported a crime. It's marital rape.
Mm.
I said, okay, I didn't realize you would see that as a crime, but
Mhm.
yeah. So they put out, I guess it's some sort of all points bulletin. If he enters the country, they would be alerted and so on. And we had to have a safety plan in operation. But then the Hague case, something that's important to know is it's an international law, so it trumps any domestic law or safeguarding that's in place. So whatever your home country is telling you they will do to keep you safe, the minute the Hague case starts, all that is out of the window because it's international. So the domestic...
Did your ex-husband know about the Hague Convention then? Was
Well, he
he?
filed it.
He filed it, so he
So
did.
he must have found out. These men always seem to find out. They all play from the same playbook, really. They all seem to find out very quickly how the Hague Convention works and use it to their advantage. There are big fathers' rights groups that disseminate that kind of information to help fathers whose children have been removed from them. So the Hague Convention is about abduction, which is not the same as kidnapping, of course, because there's no threats of money involved. It's usually a parent, usually in these days the mother, trying to keep a child safe. Abduction and retention. Retention means you've gone to another country, another jurisdiction with permission, but stayed too long. Or in a Hague case, that permission has then been revoked. So as I said, the father's allowed to change his mind and say, I know I said you could go and live there, but now you have to come back. And the courts listen and they say, yep, those children, it's their place of habitual residence. They need to go back to the father. So that's what happened in my Hague case. Although by the end of it, we'd been in the UK for over 16 months, which in the life of an under 10-year-old child is quite a long time, and they're pretty settled. We had to return. Of course, I agreed to return voluntarily, to return the children voluntarily. I returned with them. We had orders of protection because my ex, soon to be ex at that point, had been arrested for raping me. He'd been held in a cell and questioned. He wasn't allowed to enter the town that we lived in or communicate with me except via lawyers. But of course, I had to see him in court because we were then in the Hague hearings in London. And so I had an order of protection. I had undertakings, which are wonderful things. They're promises that the father makes to the court, such as I will support the partner and the mother of my children and the children financially. I will provide them with a vehicle. I will provide them with safe accommodation. I will not go near them. I will not be at the airport when they land. All sorts of promises. Anyone who's ever been in an abusive relationship knows what a promise is worth. Absolutely nothing. And that's how it usually turns out. These promises are worth absolutely nothing. So in my case, for example, he had had an undertaking to not be at the airport when we arrived, because obviously that would be terrifying. Guess who was at the airport? And he was there with police officers, with dogs, just to be even more intimidating, and a process server to serve me with papers for a family court hearing that was starting the next day. Now, another undertaking was that he would not file anything in court until I was in the country, so that I would have time then to find a lawyer for myself, an attorney.
Mhm.
So when they tried to serve me these papers at the airport.
Mhm.
I was terrified. I didn't know what accepting this envelope meant. Someone's trying to give me an envelope, and then my husband, as he still was, comes out with police officers. He was huge, 6'4", martial arts, ex-military, quite terrifying. And he's looming over us, and the children are clutching me. They're quite afraid of him as well. And this other man is trying to push this envelope at me and saying, "You must take these papers." I was like, no, I'm not going to. I thought, if I accept it, does it mean I've accepted what's in it? And I don't even know what's in it. I don't understand what this means. So I'm not going to take anything. I know that nothing can happen in court until I get here. Now I'm here so that I have time to find a lawyer. So I'm not going to take anything until I have a lawyer.
Mhm.
What I didn't realize is I was due in court about 14 hours later.
Mhm.
The next day I was due in court. He'd filed, of course, divorce and custody proceedings in the local family court in Arizona.
Mhm.
I knew nothing about it. I missed the hearing because I didn't know about it. I was still jet lagged, got off the plane with the kids the night before, staying with friends. And I then got an email from him later on when I managed to get Wi-Fi and do things like look at emails. He'd emailed me that morning about 20 minutes before the hearing started and said, "See you in court."
Mhm.
And I thought, what? What do you mean, see you in court? What is he talking about? We've just got off the plane last night. Yeah, I phoned the court. Yes, I'd missed the hearing.
Mhm.
So, of course, that reflects so badly on a mother. For a start, she's foreign. She's labelled Hague Abduction case. Abduction is a felony in the United States.
Mhm.
So you're labelled abductor, whether or not you abducted. If you
Mhm.
just retained the children, it doesn't matter. You're labelled abductor. You don't show up in court, so you obviously have no respect for the court and the judge. So they did not look kindly on you.
Mhm.
I went through a case in family court that lasted many, many months.
Mhm.
My children were removed from me under 72 hours after landing in the country. They were given to their father, and I wasn't allowed to see them for several weeks. Now, I'd always been their primary caregiver. For the last almost year and a half, I'd been their sole caregiver, living alone with them in the United Kingdom, which is also our country. But even when we'd lived in Phoenix, Arizona, their father was a pilot, a commercial pilot. He was out of state 4 or 5 days every week.
Mhm.
So I was always there with the children. I was their mother. I gave birth to them. I breastfed them both for over a year, took them to school every day, cooked for them, took care of them. Yeah, so suddenly they were taken away from me. My children lost their mum immediately. We were allowed to see each other briefly in very expensive, intensive family therapy ordered by the court. It was about $2,500–3,000 that I had to pay. And I said, I don't have the money. And I remember clearly the judge, who was blonde and did this to my ex-husband. She said, "Beg, borrow, or steal the money, but you have to pay for it, and you need to pay for it this week." So I borrowed. I didn't want to beg, and I certainly wasn't going to steal. So I borrowed money and I paid for the therapy, and that was how I could see my children over the next 6 weeks or so, was going in and out of the building where the therapy was, if their father allowed them to come and give me a hug, which he didn't always. The family court proceedings carried on, and the upshot of it was all very long, complex. The upshot of it was the children had to live with their father in the US. I could do whatever I wanted, obviously. I was encouraged to go back to the UK and get a good job because I was allowed to see them for 12 weeks of the year, school holidays. They were to be with me for the school holidays. So I thought, okay, we can live with that. They were allowed to come and visit me in the UK as well. So I thought, great, I can't stay here. I have no job, nowhere to live, no credit score, no money, no family support. I have to go back to the UK. But the kids will be coming to visit me, so it'll be fine. We'll be able to continue a relationship. Of course, one of the last sentences in the judge's decree was we have to have joint decision making everything that happens to the children, education, health, religion, for example, joint decision making. But if we couldn't agree, he has the final say. So he wrote to me immediately and said, don't worry about discussing anything. We're not going to discuss anything. I'm just going to make whatever decision I want because I have the final say. So I wrote every holiday and said I would like to see the children, obviously in the UK. He said, no, you can only see them in Phoenix. I didn't have the money to do that. If I'd come to Phoenix, I would have had to provide accommodation, healthcare, food, transport, everything. And I just couldn't afford it. In the UK, I had space. We had friends we could visit. I had people who would lend me a car. We had free healthcare, obviously. My parents would have helped provide food, as would other family members and friends. So I just couldn't afford to go to Phoenix. I was actually on welfare for 4 years. I was homeless for 12 months and I was on welfare for 4 years when I got back. So I would have made it work if they'd been able to come to the UK, but he refused. After about a year and a half, he stopped responding to me completely. So no information at all. Now it's more than 10 years on and I haven't seen my children since the 3rd of August, 2015.
It's heartbreaking, among other things, infuriating, obviously. Thank you for telling us your story, Anita, and I'm sure we'll get back to you, and I'm sure there'll be questions too from people who are attending. I'm going to talk a bit to the FiLiA Hague Mothers group, founded by Ruth Deneen. You founded the FiLiA Hague Mothers group, and you're also one of the co-founders of, I'm going to try and pronounce it correctly now, it's Welsh, Merched Camry. It's a grassroots group of women from across Wales working to protect and promote the rights of women. So that's something you've also done, Ruth. But if you would say a bit about yourself and tell us what is FiLiA Hague Mothers and what inspired you to start that project?
Sure. Well, basically, I have no background in anything useful with regards to the Hague Mothers campaign. So I didn't know about the law. I didn't know much about domestic violence. I didn't know about campaigning. However, I am an optimist, and I think that's what's carried me through. But basically, I came to this entirely by chance. So in 2021, I met a woman online, and she was in the States. She was with her young child. She was undocumented, and she was trying to escape her abusive husband, violently abusive husband. And then as we got to know each other, she told me that she was also trying to escape the convention, the Hague Convention. I'd never heard of it before. And the more I heard about it, as I'm sure everybody here feels the same way, the more absolutely horrified I was by the injustices, the brutality of this piece of legislation. So I thought I would like to try and do something about it. Yes, at the time, apart from being an optimist, I believed in a just world. So I hadn't realized, Anita's smiling there, I hadn't realized that that is just a figment of my imagination. But I also believed that if I just found the right people and asked politely, that we could fix this. Again, I'm sure Anita will smile at that one. So with this, armed with this lunacy, I thought, okay, I'll set up a campaign. But because I didn't know anything about it, I knew I needed help. And I was involved with FiLiA, which is a UK-based but globally recognized women's liberation charity. And they have 3 key aims: to build sisterhood and solidarity, to amplify the voices of women, particularly those less heard or purposefully silenced, like Hague Mothers, and to defend women's human rights. So it seemed like a really good fit. And I went to them and said, can you help? They said yes. And through them, I was linked up to the Global Sisterhood, and FiLiA Hague Mothers was launched at the FiLiA conference in Cardiff in October 2022. And as it happens, an extraordinary piece of serendipity that still amazes me. When I was still flailing around wondering how I could set this up and who I could go to for help, I went to a feminist conference, and at lunchtime, I went to the bar area and I stood next to this woman, attractive woman, grey hair. And she said, "Oh, so are you here for anything in particular?" And I said, "Oh, well, you won't have heard of it," I said, "but I'm here to deal with something called the Hague Abduction Convention." And it turned out it was Anita. So that was very early on, and what a hap chance that was. So she also told me a great deal more about it. So then I had two cases that I understood, and I started to understand just a little bit of how difficult this might be. But I still am an optimist. I still believe that with the international sisterhood, we can change this.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that was great. Amazing that you two met at that time, and that you just came to this because of a story that you heard, Ruth, from another woman. So that's really interesting. I'm going to bring Christina in now because we haven't heard from Christina, and Christina is a social worker, has worked in the area of domestic violence for a long time, and is now it does administration of FiLiA Hague Mothers. So, sorry, I've got a bit of a scratchy throat here. Hang on. So, Christina, introduce yourself, if you would, a bit, and tell us what you do with Hague Mothers, and a bit about, maybe talk about the focus of the scope of the project, because I know when I met with you all in the UK, I went to a lunch with you, and it was really one of the, even though it was an informal session, it was a lunch, it was not a panel or a big discussion. It was probably the most moving experience I had, and stuck with me, and was so powerful to meet all of you and some other women there too from all over the world, or many parts of the world. So tell me a bit about the scope of the project and how it's grown from Ruth's, seed of an idea and looking for support and finding it, and then meeting Anita and all the things that transpired. What's happening there now? And then I know I'll ask you later about the Hague Wheel, which you're going to share some information with us about that. So tell us about the scope of the Hague Mothers right now.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you for this lovely introduction. I joined Ruth and FiLiA Hague Mothers in January 2025, so a little over a year ago, and it was also by chance. Actually, I live in Budapest, Hungary. That's where I am from. And of course, we all knew, me and my colleagues, I work as my other job, I work for a women's rights organization in Budapest, Hungary, and we all knew FiLiA, and we all knew about FiLiA. And then one day I just, actually this job opportunity was sent to me by my colleague saying, "Oh, I think you would be perfect for this." And I got super excited. I knew about The Hague, but I didn't know that the depths of it, as Ruth also said. And what I say sometimes is that working with victims of domestic abuse is something that I have some experience in, and I thought that I am kind of informed and everything, but the Hague Convention adds such a layer of horrors that it is a completely new field for me as well. So I joined Ruth in January, and by that, I think FiLiA Hague Mothers was already perfect. She already collected a wonderful group of women around herself. Everyone is, our membership is now consists of over 80 women, some Hague Mothers, some lawyers, psychologists, legal experts. Everyone is somehow related to the Hague Abduction Convention. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm assisting Ruth with day-to-day things around the campaign, and we have a couple of really big goals, I think, with Hague Mothers. So we are an advocacy campaign, and we want to ensure that the significance of domestic abuse, including coercive control for mothers and their children, is fully addressed in the implementation of the convention, and that the rights of the child and their genuine best interests are central to the Hague Court's judgments. At the same time, we really understand that changing the convention actually requires agreement from all 103 signatories, as Anita mentioned. That's the number of the countries who are signatories now, and that's just not going to happen. It's just not an option right now. However, really, there is a possibility to change domestic laws that implement the Hague Abduction Convention. And we have a really good example, Brazil, who has been leading the way in this since last year when they changed the Supreme Court ruling, their Supreme Court ruling on how the Hague Abduction Convention is implemented. And in this ruling actually requires, for example, the courts to take a gender-based perspective. So it kind of raises the question, like, what happens? Exactly the question that Anita also raised. What happens when a mother decides to leave a country with her children? This ruling also acknowledges that abuse towards the mother impacts the child, as Ruth said, and it also lowers the evidence threshold for domestic abuse. So, yeah, and it also accepts the reality that domestic abuse is a grave risk. So it's a grave risk of harm. And we strongly endorse or agree with all of these measures, and we would love to see this implemented in other countries as well. And in addition to this, more generally, we also feel, and Ruth and Anita already mentioned this, that there needs to be a formal acknowledgement from the Hague Abduction Convention themselves that removal is not always wrongful. We have many, many members who are very much opposed to using the term Hague Abduction Convention, rightfully, I think, because removing a child from an unsafe environment is not abduction, that is protection. And what we also would like to achieve is that when allegations of domestic abuse are made, then there should be a full fact-finding investigation instead of this extremely quick 6 weeks return. There should be time for mothers to collect evidence and judges to look at this evidence and evaluate this evidence. And sorry, I would just say one last thing that I think it's extremely important, and it is based on very much, for example, on what Anita said and also Ruth mentioned, is that mothers or women, they don't know about the Hague Abduction Convention. It's not a well-known thing. Of course, fathers know about it when they need it, but in general, people, and especially mothers, don't know. So it would be wonderful if, for example, information about the convention would be given to mothers when they apply for a visa to work or live in another country at the embassies, for example, so that they can just get a tiny, tiny leaflet that just says, this is the Hague Abduction Convention. This happens if you move to another country with your husband, with your partner, and you have children there, or you move with your children, because that would help to raise awareness, and women would be able to make a more informed decision about this huge life-changing event, like a move. And maybe we could somehow lower the cases, the petitions that are brought against mothers. So these are the aims that we are trying to achieve, or the things that we are trying to work for.
Wonderful. Oh, great. Thank you. Yes, I heard about Brazil. And Ruth, I know that you were in Brazil, were you not? Or you were in South America recently. And could you talk a bit more about that and where you see hope for other countries? Which countries? I mean, I've heard it mentioned just recently in Canada that there's conversations to put pressure on our government here about acknowledging male violence against women as being considered in custody cases, which it hasn't been up until now. So what other countries are, aside from Brazil, how did they do that in Brazil, or how were you involved in that, if you were? And just a bit more taking off on what Christina said, building it out from Brazil.
Sure. Well, Brazil, just to go back when we first started campaigning, we were pushing really hard to get the HCCH, or the people who administer the Hague Convention, from The Hague. We're pushing really hard for them to acknowledge that domestic violence was generally part of a Hague case, which hadn't been acknowledged at all. So we had an international petition which got 37,000 signatories. We had an open letter written from Reem Al-Salam, who is the UN Special Reporter on Violence Against Women and Girls, and is a strong supporter of the campaign. We had another open letter signed by 90 international experts on domestic violence, on The Hague, etc. So And most significantly, we asked mothers to write in to the Secretary General with their stories, and we produced a mother's booklet of stories, which is on our website. In fact, it's very moving. Just small quotes from the hell that mothers have been through. And we went over to The Hague when the commission was meeting and handed that out. So the upshot of that was that the Secretary General, Berlusconi, said that he thought it was a very small problem. He thought that women were lying very frequently, but he did accept that maybe it was a small problem, and he offered to put on a forum on domestic violence and the Hague Convention in South Africa. So that was 2024, and that was the first time that this had been openly, publicly stated as a problem, and we had a number of survivors there speaking, and they just blew the room apart. Basically, these people had never heard the stories they were telling, and it was extraordinarily powerful and moving. Brazil were at that conference, represented at that conference, and a number of our colleagues who are feminists in Brazil and working in the sort of violence against women arena had been building really good relationships with the Brazilian representatives. I mean, really significantly good relationships, and had got a lot of support from them, and were pushing the judiciary to look again at this. And we were helped by the fact that there's international politics involved. And that is that a lot of women come from the global south to work in the global north. And so more frequently than not, the mothers who are involved in Hague cases are from the global south. So it's countries in the global south like Brazil who are constantly being asked to send their citizens back to an abuser, or to send the children back to the abuser who lives in the global north. So there's a lot of tension there, and there's a feeling from many countries in the global south that global north countries are extremely patronizing, quite colonial in their attitudes. So Brazil was actually quite open, because they're constantly being told off for not sending enough people back, enough children back. So they were quite open to change. So all those things came together. So at the 2024 conference in South Africa, which was, as far as The Hague were concerned, going to be the only conference, the Brazilian representative stood up and offered to host a conference in Brazil. So that's how the Brazil event came about. And we were promised at the time by the Hague people themselves that the second conference would lead to actions. And during the period that was between the South Africa conference and the Brazil one, the fathers' rights movement really got into gear and have pushed back really hard. So in fact, no official actions came out of the Brazil conference. So in terms of being there, it was hostile, it was incredibly difficult, but at least we were there. A number of speakers were there. Just one survivor was allowed to speak. So those voices have been heard twice now. So they know, and we know they know. And that actually puts us in quite a strong moral position. So one of the things we are doing that has come directly out of that, and the Brazilian government are really keen to work closely with us on it, is that the human rights aspect of this has come to the fore. So there's an understanding, spoken about in whispers, I think, within The Hague, but there's an understanding that by adhering to the convention, by prioritizing the convention, states violate their human rights obligations to their citizens, particularly their obligation to keep citizens free from harm, free from abuse, etc. So we now have a group of human rights experts who we're working with to really uncover that and demonstrate the extent to which states who are signatories are violating those fundamental rights. And so we think, in terms of who might start moving next, the UK is very nervous about The Hague. So we have a government strategy, violence against women government strategy, they're terribly proud of. And we're pointing out to them that they can have that strategy, but what they're actually doing in their in their signing up to the Hague Convention is they're completely undermining that. So I think the UK can be shifted. I think also Australia can be shifted, but I think these things take a long time. And also we've recently managed to start building a relationship with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and they've agreed. They've had one meeting with some of our American or South American colleagues, and they have agreed to have a thematic hearing, which is a sort of specialist hearing on The Hague. So we're starting to rattle those cages.
Wow.
So I think all these things, the dominoes are going to fall very quickly, very slowly. But I do believe they will fall. And the fact that Brazil, who put themselves out on a limb, so The Hague are very angry with Brazil. So they're really keen, therefore, to spread this in South America, Latin America, where everybody has a similar problem. So that's where we still stay hopeful.
It's extraordinary what you've done in this short period of time, really, and that you've been having an impact and rattling the cages of The Hague is pretty inspiring. So wow, that's great. We're gonna have another 10 or 15 minutes. I want to ask a couple more things, and then we're going to open our Q&A. But on the same topic, I know Christina wants to talk about the Hague Wheel and what that is, but I'm going to ask Anita because you explained what FiLiA Hague Mothers was doing. Anita, you founded an organization or co-founded an organization called Hague Explained. And would you tell us a bit about Hague Explained and the work that you do? Because you're also making progress in a different context in education.
Oh, yes, of course. I'd be happy to do that, Chris. Thank you. Well, Hague Explained is, as I said, a non-profit registered in England. And it was founded by myself and another mother who's been through a Hague case. She's actually, we think, the first mother to have to go through 2 Hague cases. This is about 20 odd years ago, so her children are now adults. But unfortunately, the Hague Convention causes intergenerational trauma. It never leaves a family. And her own family is now suffering into the 3rd generation, the trauma that was first brought on by the Hague Convention. What we try and do is to educate, education through experience. So we provide interactive workshops. We've worked with FiLiA Hague Mothers as well to design and develop an interactive workshop that we've offered to charities around Europe. We recorded one recently, but we develop individual workshops for charities, for universities, academics, as well as students, for law schools particularly, and for the corporate world, whether it's lawyers or anyone involved in sending staff to work abroad. So medics, journalists, academics, these are all people who travel very often. And we feel it should be part of an employer's responsibility and duty of care to employees. If they're going to send an employee with their family to work abroad, they should be informing them that it's great to go abroad. We're going to pay your travel, your family, your healthcare, private education for the children, yes. But just know before you go that you can't easily turn around and come back home again unless both parents agree. So mothers always think leaving means going home, and that's where you fall foul of a Hague Convention case, unfortunately. So we're here to raise awareness and to let people know what can happen.
That's wonderful. And what a great idea to have that be, people consider that a part of their responsibility to their staff or workers.
Yeah.
Have you had a lot of uptake for that? Are people interested?
We've had an awful lot of legal people, especially academics and law students, very interested. They don't get a lot of education at university and law school about the Hague Convention, so we're working with various law schools to try and make sure they do get at least some basic understanding of what it is. We're also very hopeful that by working, we have a lot of volunteers, wonderful volunteers from law schools and from universities in general. And we hope that by educating the students, they're of course going to go out there and let others know. And when these law students become professional lawyers, they will have a deeper understanding of what the convention is and can also help us all work to try and make it better for the children especially.
Yeah, Wonderful. And is that work all being done in the UK at this point, Anita?
It is, yes, it's in the UK. Obviously, we are happy to work abroad as well. We know how easily this is done across continents, across countries, across continents, across international borders. This webinar here involves at least 3 countries. So we're happy to offer webinars interactively that are online, as well as face-to-face we can do as well.
Yeah, because I know there's some Canadian lawyers that are members of FiLiA Hague Mothers, so I know there's connections over here, which I'm going to ask as my last question later. But first, Christina, I wanted to ask you, you wanted to talk about something called the Hague Wheel, and I'm wondering if you could tell us what that is. And you might be, if we can get it happening, if you can share your screen, you can show us while you're telling us about what the Hague Wheel is.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Well, I just thought that I would just show you this wheel because it's a tool co-created by FiLiA Hague Mothers, survivors and professionals, and its aim is to reflect specific forms of coercive control and abuse that Hague Mothers experience. And let me just try and share my screen so that can you see it? Can someone?
Yes.
Oh yes. Okay, great. So yeah, just to explain it really quickly, because I think this tool, I'm actually quite proud of it, and I'm really proud of our group for doing this, because the aim of this tool is to show and to kind of provide a framework for all the abuse that is perpetrated against mothers. And each segment of this wheel captures a tactic used against mothers to intimidate, isolate, or undermine them through international legal systems. Because what really
Can you make
stands
it a
out.
bit larger? Sorry to interrupt, Christina. Can you fill the screen with it a bit more, just so we can see the top and bottom? I don't know if anybody else is having trouble with.
Let me. No, that's not.
Zoom out a little bit, maybe, or full screen, if possible. But that's fine. No, we get the idea. If you can't, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will just show the bottom now, because I would like to talk about the bottom a little bit, and then I will just go up.
Great.
Because, as you can see, patriarchal international systems and institutions, this is not a segment in itself, because when creating this wheel, we felt that, okay, this is something much bigger. This is actually something that enables the whole system, the Hague and the abuse. So we felt that this underpins the wheel. And it kind of aims to show how state collusion and patriarchy underpin all forms of abuse in Hague-related cases. Then let me show you another segment, for example, using intimidation and threats, because this segment highlights how abusers use fear and manipulation to assert power, and their tactics include threats to use the Hague Convention to take the children, intimidating legal claims, threats based on immigration status, and emotional blackmail. And what we found when we were creating this tool, and this was shared by mothers, is that this fear of losing their children or being disbelieved intensifies the control perpetrators hold over mothers. Then another common thing that Hague mothers experience, I hope you will see isolation here in the left corner, because this is also something that survivors of Hague-related abuse often experience. And it's really an intense form of isolation, and it happens on multiple levels, because it includes self-isolation out of fear. For example, if mothers take any action, which could be seeking therapy or any type of support that is going to be used against them in court, which really, it happens often in domestic abuse cases as well. Many women feel blamed or shamed for losing their children, which is, of course, that's not something that happens. Their children are taken from them, but that also leads to emotional distress. There is physical and legal isolation that is common, especially for mothers who are forced to remain in a country or return to a foreign country where they lack social and legal support systems. There are language barriers, cultural unfamiliarity, and a lack of resources, and these all create further barriers and deeper isolation. And this isolation is often heightened after a Hague return, where mothers may be criminalized and definitely stigmatized.
Mhm.
And let me just introduce one last segment that I find really important, which is male privilege, because this is something that is experienced by each and every woman in family courts and each and every Hague mother in Hague proceedings, because women are punished for leaving while men are rewarded for seeking custody. One mother, when we were putting this together, this is a quote from someone that said, "To me, that seems like one of the biggest things, just being believed. You just have to show up and say, I am a good father now, and that's it. This is the privilege." Because these legal systems frequently uphold this gendered double standard, and fathers are often granted the benefit of the doubt, requiring little more than declarations of interest to be taken seriously. And mothers must extensively prove that they are good enough carers, even though they have been caring for their children for many, many years. Sometimes mental health diagnoses, trauma responses, or prior dependency are weaponized against mothers as well. So the reason why I found it important to introduce the wheel is actually because we created this to acknowledge and to introduce and to explain the abuse that Hague mothers go through. And I think this tool is doing a great job introducing that or explaining that. And you can find this on our website, along with a short explainer expert paper that can be read. So thank you.
And oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And, you know, having worked on this issue in Canada many years ago and experienced this in my own family intergenerationally, both my mother and myself and my daughter being affected, it's that idea when I traveled across the country after my case was finished, when I traveled across the country and I was connected with other women, and this was domestic child custody, I expected, you know, certain women would be losing their children, perhaps lesbian women, poor women, indigenous women. What I found was, and that was true, what I found was women from every walk of life, wealthy white women who owned property and were quite privileged in their own lives. Everything from that down to 19-year-old women who were poor, and that was the thing that overrode it, was that if a man did one thing that was a fatherly thing, that took his daughter to a lesson or did anything, that was treated as if it was the most incredible thing. And women that did everything could just have one little criticism of them and they were no good. So that was just I see it continues. I know that things haven't changed in Canada since that time, and that women of all walks of life were losing their children. And these were often women who were abused, and sometimes the children were being abused. And in this country, it doesn't matter here either. And the men's rights movement I got quite familiar with and got chased away once from a rally where I was filming it. So that must be building internationally too. And I just wanted to ask quickly, how do you see that playing out globally, the men's rights movement, fathers' rights movement? Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Ruth, maybe with your traveling that you've done?
I'm happy to. Well, happy is not the right word, is it? I think we're living in a tsunami of misogyny, which I think porn culture is enabling, but also the rise of the strongman dictator in so many countries. Not just Trump, but obviously he's very he's an archetype. So I am seriously concerned, and I think those of us who have daughters or grandchildren, female grandchildren, are particularly worried about it. So I'm not. That's where my optimism stops, to be honest, when I put my head above the parapet and look at that tidal wave. And I have to very quickly pull my head down and look at the sisterhood and remember that in spite of backlashes over the years, endless backlashes, women keep going. And we won't stop until we get some sort of justice.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Does anyone want to add anything yet before we open the Q&A, or shall we just go in there, and the chances are you will find questions that you want to answer? Anita, what would you like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. If I can just quickly add, I mean, absolutely what Ruth said is so true. And it is depressing looking at what's happening in the world today. We all know what's going on with various files that are coming to light and various country leaders who may or may not respect women at all. And I really think that it's becoming clearer and clearer that women are largely subjected to acts of violence, to what's really torture, because they are women. And there is this misogyny, hatred of women. And there's also a word that I came up with, misometry, which is the hatred of the mother figure, the mother of your own children, or just mothers in general. And we are being penalized for what? For giving birth to the human race. But we are being forced to suffer.
Yeah, thank you. And so we're going to open our Q&A format, and for attendees who are here at the session, if you could type in questions that you have, whether they're for a particular person or general questions, and I will find those questions, and I'll get them to the panelists, read them to you. But there's a question for you, Anita, from somebody, a Canadian, wanting you to expand on referring to, I don't know if you use this term, but I think you were referring to non-state torture. And I know this is coming from someone with great experience in that, knowledge of that. So would you like to expand on that as a form of violence against women?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you for the question, Linda. That's a really good question. The non-state torture is experienced by just about every mother who goes through a Hague Convention case, because whether or not at the end of it you lose custody of your children and perhaps lose all contact with them, that threat is always there, and it's a mother's worst fear, the fear of losing your child. So whether that's through some kind of legal action or a physical threat from the father, and let's face it, there are some dreadful physical threats that come from the father. But then also what's happened to the mother before she gets to this point. Those of us who have lived in relationships where there is domestic abuse have experienced all forms of abuse, really. So there is non-fatal strangulation. I experienced that in my own case. There is rape, the various forms of sexual abuse. There is the threat that comes to the children and possibly to other members of the family. I know mothers who've been through situations where their own parents or the grandparents are threatened by the father, or siblings, cousins might be threatened by the father. Friends can be threatened by the father. So the non-state torture really gets its tentacles into so many aspects of what the mothers have to live with and survive in the attempt to keep their children safe.
Yes. Yes, we've certainly seen whole families attacked or murdered, even in Canada at times.
Yeah.
Sisters, mothers. Yeah.
I did some research, so one of the things that helped me is education. And I, when I returned without my children, I decided I need to understand what had happened. So I completed a master's in women and child abuse, and that helped explain the forms of abuse and what happens, because if you don't have the right language to explain it, it's very difficult to explain it to anyone else. And actually what it all boils down to is what happens to the children. As mothers, we are adults, we can seek help, we can try and find ways to support each other, and we do. So many of us are in contact around the world, but what happens to the children? What kind of torture are they actually going through as they're having to grow up, too often without their mothers, without their entire maternal family, without their heritage? What are they losing?
Yes. Ruth, you wanted to add something to that?
I only wanted to say hello to Linda, and to let people know that Linda and her colleague Jeanne have started a network for non-state torture network, which launched on the 3rd of February. So I'm sure any of those of you who are interested in that. And I'd also like to say thank you to both of them, because I hadn't really considered torture and domestic abuse in this as being one and the same thing. And meeting them and hearing them, and I've been to a couple of presentations, extraordinary presentations that they've given, has made me really understand that the division between the two things is paper thin or not there at all.
Yes.
So yes, thank you for that work. And yeah.
Yes. And Linda, if you would type in the chat the name of an organization or a place that we can then refer people to, since you have a new organization, that would be great. And here's a woman who's says, my case was in New Zealand and I was trying to return to the Netherlands. I'd like to suggest that when the father's a stakeholder, in my case, he's a barrister, that they have extra clout and power. Is this also addressed, for instance, when, Anita, you speak to third parties in your education, I guess, is what she's asking.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question as well. Yes, we do try and explain that very often the fathers do have positions where they are viewed as often legal experts, a barrister, for example. So they are often seen by the courts as what they say carries a lot more weight than a mother who might be slightly hysterical because she's seeing her children being taken away from her. So we do try and explain there is this total imbalance in power of a very powerful, professional, well-financed father who has all the contacts to get all the information on what the Hague Convention is and how it works, and a mother who perhaps hasn't been out in the in working life for a few years, perhaps looking after the children, and doesn't have any background, any information, finds it really hard to source support, which is what, of course, Ruth is trying to do, and what we try and do as well is provide that information. So my research, for example, that Linda mentioned, was with other mothers who've been through these cases and completely lost custody of their children. And we can prove that the fathers in these cases are the ones that have the power and bring it to court, and the courts, as Ruth also touched on, the minute the father says, oh, but I want to be a good father now, that's it.
Yes.
That's what they want to see, and then they will give the father everything.
Well, and if they have that kind of expertise, that sort of calm professionalism really goes over well in courts, doesn't it?
Yeah, they know all the legal words to use. They know all the people to contact. Yeah.
Yeah. Gail here has a question, wondering about women's shelters and crisis centers. How much do they know, in your mind? How much do they know about this convention? What kind of roles do they play in this situation? And might you comment on how the relationship between activists and political supporters in Brazil came about? So it's a two-part question. Does somebody want to start with the women's shelters? Are they educating women about this? Christina?
So yeah, with our training, we are definitely trying to address not just women's shelters, but crisis centers and any type of professional who could be in touch with a potential Hague mother. And on our website, we have quite a few resources that are specifically for professionals who work with victims of domestic abuse. And for example, we have a flowchart that is aimed at social workers or case workers, for example, who work in these centers, that can help identify a woman who could be at a potential Hague risk. So we definitely we understand that these professionals have an extremely big responsibility while not receiving any type of training on the Hague. So they experience a lack of knowledge, it must be really frustrating. So with our training, we are really trying to address this gap.
Right. And I'm sure, schools and hospitals, there are other kind of institutions where this information would be really useful to people, whether or not they would consider being educated on that. I don't know, but there's so many, the more I think about it, the more you talk about it, the more I see that there's so many places where these children or their mothers are involved in, if there's been a move or if there's been harm and they're going to the hospital, that kind of thing, that people know that about this Hague Convention and about coercive control, and even in a domestic situation and violence. So yeah, it's pervasive.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I just pop in there, Chris, and just add to what Christina was saying? I think one of the really important factors is that you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of the organizations that are set up in all of our countries to help and support women and children, for example, I can use my own experience in the United Kingdom. We have a charity called Women's Aid, which is set up to help women to do exactly what it says. And I was in contact with them. They offered to find me a place in a refuge. And the police who I went to agreed and said that would be great. If I was in a refuge with my children, we would be safe. What they don't know, and this is a basic that everybody who's working in the field should know, is that an international law trumps domestic. So you might keep someone safe domestically, but once that paper is served on you, a petition, you've got to go to court for a Hague case. It doesn't matter that you're in a refuge. It doesn't matter that you have an order of protection. It doesn't matter that your abuser is banned from the area you live in. That all falls to the wayside. And I think just that is something that people don't know.
Yes, for sure. Okay, great. Thank you. There's a couple more questions, actually. The first question that came in that we haven't addressed. Somebody wanted to know what prompted this seminar. And I think because I was at FiLiA in Brighton at the conference this year, and I met you all there. I mean, I had contact prior to that with Ruth, at least with you, and because there was a call out for some help in Canada for somebody that was trying to get here. But when I met everybody and I saw how this small grassroots organization was having such a huge impact, and then meeting also Anita and another woman there who was in a dire circumstances and affected by child custody and removal of her children in a different scenario. But it was just the combination of inspiring, moving, inspiring in that I find in Canada often things move very slow, and some of it is that our country's so broad and it's harder to organize nationally, but also there's a certain passivity here, I think, that I wasn't seeing when I was hearing from some activists that I met internationally at FiLiA. And so I just felt like, because this is a global issue and it affects women and children all over the world, including many in every province of this country, both domestically and also globally, I just thought it was an important one. And then the question was, do we have any actions planned together or separately? And I think maybe she's asking about Hague Mothers or Hague Explained when Women's Space Vancouver. Well, this is our first thing we've planned together. So that's what we're doing at this moment, is trying to get this information out there about these two organizations and about the global situation, in knowing that it's affecting women right here as well as around the world. So thanks for those questions. And another one came in down here at the bottom. A woman wants to know if there's been any cases where the Hague Convention, which aims to keep the children in their habitual residence, has been successfully used to do the opposite, to keep children out of the jurisdiction. Is that something that anybody can address?
Well, I can only speak from experience, but depending on how you define habitual residence, and generally it's seen in these cases as being at least 365 days. Some countries have different laws about when you have residency, but for the purposes of the Hague, it's habitual residence, and it's generally seen that you've got to catch the child within 365 days, so within a year. But what makes a child actually feel at home in a country, that's probably being with the primary carer, having family, having friends, being at school, and so on. So when you've got cases that drag on well over 12 months, the child is habitually resident in that jurisdiction. So in my own case, my children were 16 and a half months in the UK. They've never been allowed to come back here again. So they have been kept out of this jurisdiction. And I know other mothers in the same situation. So perhaps that answers that question a little bit.
Yes, living with you was their habitual residence. You were their habitual residence in a way. Your caring for them was.
And I know of cases where breastfeeding babies have been taken away from the mother, who's all they know. So yes, children have been kept out of their place of habitual residence, the jurisdiction.
I would answer the same as Anita. I'm not sure if that's what Priya is getting at.
No.
Certainly the threat of the Hague can keep you in a place. Whether the Hague itself can be used to, other than the sort of cases that Anita said, whether it can be used to keep you out of a place, I think is something else. I think part of the problem is that once you're involved in the Hague, it's like a bear trap, isn't it? You know, you just put a fingernail in the bear trap and whoomph, the whole thing comes down on your head. So as an abductor, or as a woman who has taken herself into exile unlawfully, or, you know, fled with a child, whatever, you are already in a situation where the courts, either the criminal courts or the family courts in the country that you've left, will be on the alert for you. You know, you already start with a problem. So it could be that you, for example, I know of mother and child where the child is now well aged out of, so the Hague only lasts till you're 16. A child is 16, and I know of a case where one's child is now 21 years old, but they are frightened to go back to the country where the abuser is, because they are afraid that he will use any sort of legal process to try and get back at her. And that's the sort of thing that happens in all sorts of domestic abuse cases, isn't it? So,
Have you come across any exit trafficking to then use the Hague criminal laws?
I think the first thing to point out here is that the Hague Convention is specifically civil, not criminal.
I see.
It's not supposed to be used as a criminal case,
Right.
criminal hearing at all.
Right. Right.
It's purely civil. There are other laws that will criminalize the mother, but not the Hague Convention.
Right. Okay. When you were mentioning, Anita, about women sometimes losing their newborn children, it reminds me of, there was a very vocal, aggressive men's rights activist that a rally I went to when I was filming it in Winnipeg, and the man who was speaking, who was the main organizer, had gotten custody of newborn twin baby girls because his wife was depressed, and he took her to the hospital, and then he got full custody of the kids while she was in the hospital for postpartum depression. And he was there proudly with infant, probably never been breastfed little baby girls that he was then going to raise on his own, or with probably a new partner or something. And so, yeah, it can start affecting children the minute they're born.
And those cases exist, Chris, those kinds of cases exist in domestic family court cases. Of course, I've got a good friend here in this country whose 2 children were removed from her and handed to the abusive fathers because she had mental health difficulties and asked for help. They said, oh, if you might be suicidal, we can't leave the children with you, it's too dangerous. Take them away. So, of course, her mental health problems increased dramatically because then her children were taken away from her. That wasn't a Hague case, so adding an international dimension to it just adds to the burden and the trauma and the torture that the mother is experiencing.
Yes. Yeah, and asking for help, which is the thing you should be doing, is then weaponized against you and seen as a problem. I think I might have missed this one. In addition, okay, are there any plans, Ruth, on how to reach the children who often, through having been little, don't know why they don't hear from their mother again, or don't see the mother? So as they grow up, they might seek to contact the mother. Are there any plans and strategies how to reach children who have been lost in that situation, I guess is the question.
it is a good question, isn't it? And I don't know if Anita wants to answer it, given that she's in that situation. We don't have any answers at all. And I think children, I mean, we know from the literature that children are often, for survival purposes, they end up siding with the father because they don't know what else to do. He's the only figure they've got in their lives. But also, children are told by fathers that the mother doesn't care about them, etc. So I think the damage done to the cruelty
The children.
of that to children. Well, again, we're back to non-state torture, aren't we? But I have no idea how we would even begin to try and reach out to those children. So
or I've heard of somebody telling their children that their mother died when she hadn't as well. Anita, how old are your children?
Well, my daughter just turned 19 a couple of weeks ago. I've had no contact with her since she was 17 and a half.
Okay.
I was thrown back into family court again after 9 years of not being in family court and feeling very relieved that at least I wasn't being subjected to what's known as lawfare, repeated petitions in court and repeated hearings that the mother has to go to, which many of my friends have to go through.
Right.
And I thought, well, at least that's not happening. My ex obviously didn't do that because he knew then the court would look at the fact that he hadn't done what he was supposed to do, which is allow the children to see me. I didn't go back to court because I was afraid he would just kill the children if things went well for me. So my children have been raised with lies and brainwashing. And my daughter turned 18. I didn't even know where to send a gift or a card or anything. She's now 19. My son is 20. He'll soon be 21. They are both adults, but they are living in a setting that is very much against a mother who has been an abductor, who had dared to take the children away from the father.
Right.
As I said, it's a felony in the US, so
Yeah.
it's viewed very negatively, and they have enough people around them who will push the father's side of things
Sure.
rather than encouraging any contact with the mother, and encourage the children to completely forget the first 9 or 10 years of their lives.
Yes. And I imagine he got together with somebody different at some point. And
Oh, there's a couple of girlfriends that moved in and out.
okay.
A couple of them got in touch with me afterwards to
I
tell
see.
me what went wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long story.
Yeah. Sure, it always is. Yeah. Well, you know, for those people who are attending who want more information, want to learn more, want to get involved, just or curious or have questions, there's the two organizations, Hague Explained and FiLiA Hague Mothers, who both have websites that you can go to. There's ways to communicate with our guests. And before I thank our guests, I want to thank all of you who attended the webinar. If you appreciate these webinars, please go to our website and you can make a request to join our mailing list, and then you'll hear about future webinars. If you're able, you can also feel free to make a donation. No donation's too small to help with our costs to do this work. And our webinars are recorded and they're posted. So if you have friends, family, colleagues who aren't here today, they can view this conversation online in the near future. The link will be on our webinar and take you to the YouTube channel. And now I really want to thank Anita and Christina and Ruth. We really appreciate you took the time on a Saturday evening to speak to us. It's 8:30 in where you live. And it's been really incredible to learn so much more from you today about what you're doing and the work you're doing. And it's so inspiring, this global network that you've been building. It's just impressive. So inspiring, educational, moving. You're so smart, and I really admire all the work that you've done. So thank you from everybody here for taking the time and meeting with us and giving us all this information, because it's just been wonderful. So thanks.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Chris. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to get the word out a bit more.
Yes, and we will be in touch, and we will also let you know when this video is posted as well, so you can use it in whatever way that you want to. And thanks everybody for attending, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Bye.